Teachers of Reddit, what is the most overkill, way more work than necessary assignment you've seen handed in? Former teacher. I used to live in Japan, and my first gig was as an English instructor. I had these two students, best friends, both housewives in their 50s, who took private lessons with me once a week. They had no legitimate reason for learning English, they were just bored. When I asked them one time why they were studying, they literally told me, "We have nothing to do." One time, we somehow got on the topic of folk stories. They brought up one I wasn't familiar with, and I was like, "Well, maybe you can tell me about it next week." Next class rolls around, and they just wordlessly head up to the front of the classroom and bring out a box of those old-time storytelling sheets, the kind where each illustrates a pivotal scene, and on the back you've got the dialogue and narration to tell the story. These two had gone through and translated everything into English, and had decided to act it out for me. Now, the story in question is Momotaro. It's about a young boy that puts together a ragtag group to go off and fight some villains. So, try to imagine two Japanese housewives in their mid-50s really getting into character as they act out the parts of a young boy, an elderly married couple, talking dogs and pheasants, and even fearsome. They went at it for like 15 minutes, and it was the best dank thing I'd ever seen. Then, at the end, they gave me the storytelling sheets and told me to always remember. Heck, yeah. Wish I could have them as a DM for Dungeons and Dragons. I had a physics teacher in HS that told us if we forgot to put the unit of measurement after a number, he would assume the unit of measurement was a furlong, which was used in horse racing or something. As he was grading papers, he came across this kid who was way off on every single question and didn't put a single unit of measurement. Turns out the kid converted every answer to furlongs and got a 100%. He went the extra furlong for that one. I was the T in a college psych class, so teacher and student I guess. The class was all student athletes in the summer. They needed to do minimum work to get the C and keep their scholarship and keep the university donors happy with their ball catching skills. They were supposed to write a paper on mental health. 5 pages. This one guy, star running back, wrote 20 pages of how his mom struggled with depression and how that changed his life and outlook. I think he started writing it and it became a cathartic experience for him. I thought he was the dumbest kid in the class when we first started. He got the only A. It is always the odd ones that surprise you. Haha. In kindergarten my son would get assigned class walk by the teacher that had something like the following directions. Draw 4 birds. So my son would draw 4 birds. Then he'd draw some clouds. Then he'd draw the ground. Then he'd draw some trees. Then he'd add nests, rocks, mountains, sometimes a river, etc. The teacher told us she was very impressed at his drawing skills and willingness to go the extra mile, but it was really tough to figure out where the 4 birds were. She didn't shame him or us. She thought it was funny, but still overkill. We have had a few conversations about this topic with him over the years, letting him know the point of that exercise was to make sure the teacher knew he understood the quantity of 4 things and could represent that. Now he completes his class walk and then turns the paper over, when it's blank on the back, and draws huge, imaginative scenes on almost every paper. I like this kid. Astronomer here. A few years back I TA'd the physics lab for pre-med students, that is, undergrads who want to be doctors. Their physics class was only algebra based instead of calc based. These labs had a little write-up which was maybe 5-6 pages max, and I told the students up front that there's no way these had to go over 10 pages, double spaced. Yeah, I then had to change the policy to start docking people who went over 10 pages, because I was getting 15-page reports. I would then get pages just shy of 10 pages, single spaced in tiny font, as if I wouldn't notice this trick and had never been a student. These were all such type A students who figured I'd be more impressed by more words, and needed to get an A in the class after all. There was also rampant cheating, but that's another story. The thing is, these reports were never good, because as I've said these labs were not that complicated. If you were that verbose it meant your writing was not concise, and that's terrible scientific writing. I kept offering help on this, but the do twice as much as the teacher requests mentality was too strong for me. I always wonder which made it to med school from that class, particularly out of the more neurotic ones. Crap like that is why all my prof said stuff like this is a 9,000 word paper. Maximum. This means I will stop reading and marking at 9,000 words. Obligatory. Not a teacher yet, but my current creative writing teacher told our class about a girl in one of her other classes. They had an assignment to write a short piece of around 500 words, and one girl handed in a small binder with a 16-page, around 8k word story in it, complete with a cover page and illustrations. The teacher used this as an example of what not to do. The worst part was her saying that the content of the work wasn't actually very good. I still cringe to think about it. I once wrote all the answers on a biology test in rhyme. I was extremely arrogant and loved showing off. I'd probably punch me in the face if I met myself from 8 years ago. Found Gvove. Buddy of mine was super into blacksmithing. In metal shop class we had to do something which applied the techniques we learned. This dude made a freaking suit of armor that he had been working on for like 4 months before he even took the class. Not a teacher, etc. High school drama class had a very laid back, fun teacher. As such, a lot of people started showing up to class late because it was right after lunch and the teacher was chill and didn't mind 5 minutes or whatever. But it started to be a problem when half the class still wasn't there 15 minutes after the bell rang. So he asked for a volunteer to find a fun way to punish people who were more than 5 minutes late. My hand shot into the air like Hermione Granger in her first potions class. The teacher said, you know, just like a spinny board or a box you draw cards out of or something. But I already had a plan. I built a wheel, like what you see at carnivals, where it spins and a pointer lands on a section. Only this was no ordinary wheel. It lit up. It made sounds. It was literally constructed out of a wooden art easel and stool top looking thing I got at Home Depot. No cheap poster board or glitter here. No sir. It took me a week. The day I brought it into school, I set it up before classes started and got to drama 10 minutes early to plug it in and test it to make sure it worked okay. Then I turned off the lights, covered it with a sheet, and waited. Once everyone was in their seats, I whipped the sheet off and flipped the switch. Everyone was freaking speechless, including the teacher. The wheel had stuff like slam poetry about Mr. Teacher do the Macarena and so forth. It was freaking awesome. Once in a while somebody would come in late just so we'd have an excuse to get the thing out. It's been 10 years, so I doubt it's still there, but you can be dang sure I'm gonna check out the reunion. Your post starts with not a student, but upon reading it your story seems to indicate otherwise. Well, I am a teacher but my students are lazy, so I will tell a story about myself. I was in a freshman level US history course that required a end of the semester paper. I had done the research for it but hadn't written anything by the night before. That night I downed a 4-pack of energy drinks and wrote a 20-page essay that I still maintain was barely long enough to answer every question they wanted answered. It was the longest essay turned in by 13 pages. Most people wrote 3 pages. Nothing drives me nuts quite like having an essay prompt that demands 60 pages of response, but wants you to answer it in a paragraph. No, I say, there is too much to be said. During student teaching last semester, one of the assignments my co-student teacher created was for a short story, basically just 5 paragraphs composing exposition, rising action, climax, falling action, and conclusion. One of my students turned in 9 pages of an epic. As a writer, I was thoroughly impressed. As a teacher, I was dreading sifting through 9 pages like I was Rasgulla. Student not teacher yada yada. I was in a costuming course in college, and instead of learning actual sewing, we were given a piece of paper with a word on it. Each word was a garment from a different era, and we had to look it up and create an advertisement for it as if we were advertising it to the people of that time. I was annoyed that I didn't get to actually learn anything, so I decided to take the assignment dead seriously. I had a garment from ancient Rome and, with the help of my fluent father, wrote the entire thing in Latin. As a language enthusiast, this is my favorite post on this thread. I teach history and I was teaching about the history of boats and famous boats. The assignment was to make a model of any type of boat: warboat, cruise ship, exploring boats, or mythology boats. I gave examples of blueprints for warboats, drawings of cruise ships, etc. It was an easy project. I come into work and find a 1-inch scale model of freaking Noah's Ark and a 30-page essay paper debunking the flood. every animal fitting in the ark, Noah food supplies, and the science behind a 30-day flood. The student told me he likes working with wood and learning about new things. He knows I am a historian who loves studying about religion and thought I would enjoy it. He proceeds to hand me a second essay about why most major religions have a great flood of some sort. The student is in college for history and science thanks to me. Actually, a teacher gave my 8th graders a presentation assignment on a genetic disorder of their choice. I didn't want to stress them out, mostly wanted to get them familiar with genetic mutations, how different mutations cause different problems. I'm thinking like 5-minute presentations tops. This kid comes in, brings his cousin who has the super rare, literally like 10 people in the world have this disorder he's chosen, gives a 20-minute, beautifully explained, in detail presentation that includes everything from the actual karyotype of his cousin's chromosomes to the details of how exactly his specific medication works. That kid got extra points. I hope he becomes a geneticist. My professor told me this story once when I was an undergraduate. Keep in mind I went to a really liberal, almost stupidly casual college, which is probably why this man still had a job. He was my literature and writing professor who taught a lot of veggie-lit courses and had a unique slant in which we would watch a film a week that related to the theme of the course. So it was also a mini film studies, I guess. Because the courses were taught thematically, it worked. Now the story he told happened many decades past, but the short version is that he was tired of watching the same films over and over and wanted to experience how a student would experience a film for the first time in a class setting. He had this brilliant, misguided idea to order a movie based on title only and watch it fresh with the class. The movie he chose was called 8, I think. It involved a number, and he assumed they were referring to Fibonacci. Nope, it was gay P. Hardcore gay P. My professor didn't want to admit to the class that he goofed, so he sat through the entire thing pretending that it was intentional. One by one all the students grew disgusted by CM shots and butt munching and they left. At the end of the film only one student remained. A nervous transfer student that had arrived that semester. My professor turns to him, his eyes wide and horrified by what he has just seen, and asks, "My God, why did you stay for all of that?" To which he quietly replies, "You said at the beginning of the semester that we weren't allowed to leave during the movie section." I feel like that kid went above and beyond that day. Sitting about to have a cavity filled. You just made me laugh and feel better. Kudos and upvote to you. I was the student in this scenario. Back in high school, I took Civics 3 enterprise classes. Well, one project was to pair up. A team had to come up with a general product, and each would make their own brand and create a flyer for it. The two would then present it as if they were competing products. Me and my partner decided on doing energy drinks. So my partner makes his brand, Stream Energy. I, on the other hand, being the Smash Bros fanboy I was still am, decided to name my brand after my then main, Captain Falcon. So my project was called Falcon Punch. Day of the presentation, my partner shows off his flyer for Stream Energy. When it's my turn, I showed what I had did. Not only did I make a flyer, I put in my computer skills and made a full-on commercial and presented it to the class. Not too long ago, I came across my old teacher. Even after almost 7 years, he told me that he still has that DVD. He uses it as an example of what someone did to cement that I would love to see your commercial if that's possible. Obligatory, not a teacher, but in high school I took AP US history with a lot of my friends, and there was about a month between the AP exam and the end of the school year. So our teacher gave us an assignment to basically write an essay about literally any subject of American history that we wanted and present it in front of the class. My friend did his on the General Robert E. Lee, and his report was in depth to the point of obnoxious. Our presentations to the class were limited to 20 minutes and he spent his entire 20 minutes talking not about Robert E. Lee, but his father. Because you can't really understand Robert E. Lee without understanding his father. I swear he almost had a whole book written on the subject. This is my favorite thing out of this whole thread. You can't really understand Robert E. Lee without understanding his father. That's just pure gold. This is about me as a student. In middle school health, there was an assignment to give a speech on the dangers of an illegal drug. This was back in the days of DARE. I was assigned marijuana. I wrote a fairly lengthy rhyming speech which was really a poem that I memorized and recited to the class. The teacher liked it so much that it was published in the school newsletter and I was asked to recite it at the next assembly in front of the entire school. I didn't even get a perfect score on the speech. The scale was out of 6 and I got 3 6s and a 5, although I can't remember what for, but I was pretty annoyed at the time. Probably because I am a terribly nervous public speaker. I was a pretty gratuitous show off in my younger years. Also, I smoke weed pretty regularly now. I assigned a culture project for AP Human Geography. I assigned 14 world regions and asked for 3 languages spoken, dominant religions, migration patterns, etc. There was some more. However, a student included in her 40-page binder, not what I was expecting, the following, among other things: money from each country in the region, packaged food from each region, and she took apart 40 musical greeting cards so that when you turned the pages it played music that would correspond with the theme of the page. Most kids just bullet pointed it. After that year I used her project to tell my new students that was the minimum for a C. And that's how we set expectations. I was the student in these scenarios, but both times I genuinely just misunderstood. The first was pretty straightforward and common. I wrote an essay instead of a paragraph. Ended up paying off though because that teacher loved me after that. The second scenario was in science class. We were given an assignment to do a project on an element. Options for projects included posters, slideshows, and newspaper articles. Stuff like that. Another option was a short story, which ended up meaning just a few paragraphs. I didn't know that, however, so I made an entire children's book about gold. I made gold a character, wrote it, illustrated it, everything. It ended up being about 15 pages in total. My teacher actually told me I should send it somewhere to get it published, but I never ended up doing it and I have no idea where the book is now. Which is a shame, because I spent a ridiculous amount of time on it. There is a great lost children's story about gold out there somewhere, lost in the ether, never to grace the eyes and ears of young children everywhere. Obligatory, not a teacher. I was the student. In math class 1 Faye, everyone was acting out and talking. This was like 11 years old. The teacher got super P and set us homework of every question in the entire chapter of a textbook we'd just started on. As I was at a new school I was terrified of being the only one not to do the homework, so I went home and tried it all that night. It probably took me about 8 hours straight. When I handed the homework in the next day I apologized that I didn't really understand the last few sets of questions and probably got them wrong. But I'd given it my best effort. Honestly think the teacher was just embarrassed I'd attempted it. After that he was always kinda nice to me though. Don't think anyone else even attempted the homework and the teacher didn't mention it again. Iron it. Our teacher had us present a chapter from the European history textbook as a group assignment. My friends and I wrote and performed a 5-song rock opera about Peter the Great. Many as we had. I want this. I want it badly. It could be the next Hamilton. Obligatory, not a teacher. But, in high school everyone made a huge deal about the sophomore biology research paper. The paper itself was something like 20 pages long, and needed to have an accompanying PowerPoint presentation that you would actually present to the class at the conclusion of the assignment. After hearing people make such a big deal about it, I was determined to do well. So I decided to write my paper on genetic therapies for degenerative diseases. At the time they were still fairly new, so I ended up spending hours and hours first teaching myself genetics, and then combing through every scientific and medical journal I could find for information. At one point my teacher expressed concern that I was taking on too much, but I thought she was just underestimating me. I have trouble with executive functioning, so I used to have a lot of trouble with organization and turning in assignments on time. But I was really excited about this topic, so I assured her I had it under control and kept working. As it turns out, I had misjudged how deep people were getting with their topics. On the first day of presentations I remember this feeling of disbelief as I watched everyone else give what seemed like second grade science presentations. One girl literally just wrote a report on what an APGAR score is, which essentially involves looking at a newborn baby every once in a while to make sure it's still breathing. I ended up getting an awesome grade on my paper, but I'm pretty sure I lost to everyone with my PowerPoint presentation. I felt like they were all judging me for being a show-off when I really just thought I was working at the expected standard. Not the teacher, I was the student. The teacher had assigned a 10-page paper. Back when that was a lot of work, a guy turned in a 49-page paper. I did this unintentionally, supposed to be a 10-page paper, double-spaced. But I missed the double space part, so I ended up turning in a 20-page equivalent paper. Teacher gave me an extension to trim it down. Student, not teacher. I had a professor once who had extremely strict rules for papers. 12 points times New Roman. Duh. Couldn't be less than 2 pages or more than 3 pages single-spaced once you took out the heading and title. His goal was for us to be concise. Since this was a Science Y course, I went to office hours once and was waiting in the hall for the prof when a kid from our class comes up absolutely shaking with anger. He got a 70% or something on his paper. I looked at it and it was like 9 pages long and tiny but font. I mean, you didn't follow the rules, friend. He was furious, but I hope he learned a lesson about doing what you're told. As I get older, I'm starting to realize high school wasn't all about teaching various subjects about that world, but more so a study and examination on how well you can follow the rules. Plenty of kids don't go to college and end up working blue-collar jobs, and it's absolutely necessary to have the skills to follow rules. History prof here. I assigned a new biography of Jesse H. Jones a few semesters ago. Big shot Texas banker, FDR appointee, fellow Houstonian. Only written assignment associated with the material was a 2-3 page mini research paper on any related topic from the book. Easy, right? Turned out one of Jones' great nephews was in my class that semester. I had no idea until the kid brought in a 12-page paper along with a ton of valuable family mementos and correspondence to show the class. We wound up doing 2 weeks on the topic. Even the students who hadn't originally read the book got excited and caught up. My high school roommate was a math genius. Literally first in international tournament genius. One semester, the principal, himself a math professor, wanted to work with my roommate for some research stuff, and gave him his PhD thesis as some introductory reading. My roommate not only read and understood the 100-page paper, but also highlighted several errors in it. Sorry, not a teacher. My sister had to write an essay. The subject was very open, and after a week she went to teacher anxiously and told her that she had written 37 pages and isn't even near finishing. So could she have a week or so extra time so she could cover even most of the subject? The teacher told her that she expected 3 pages. I'm not a teacher, but I can imagine she was puzzled by this. In 3rd grade we were tasked with writing a 5-paragraph book report over the weekend. My dad made me write a full book report that ended up being around 5 pages. He sat there the entire time I wrote it on the typewriter. This was in 1990 or so. I still remember the teacher's face being "WTF is this?" I asked for 5 paragraphs. A little off topic, but my pet peeve is when a teacher says I want an essay that's exactly 1,000 words long or something. I'll make sure to keep it short enough, but inevitably there's someone in the class who goes way overboard and does double or triple the amount they were told to. Then this person manages to get the best mark in the class even though they didn't follow instructions. I've even heard teachers say that they'll deduct marks if you're off the exact word count but still give the best mark to the longest essay. I'm seeing examples of that all over this thread and it's killing me. Just because something is longer does not mean it takes more effort. Condensing your thoughts takes a lot of effort too. I've only experienced this with college professors. I have the utmost respect for my high school English teacher who always answered with however long it needs to be good. Surprisingly, no one was as smart as and turned in a 3-sentence paper. But then again, it probably wouldn't be good. He just cared that we put effort into our papers. He never fussed about the length, only the quality. Not a teacher. I'm a student, taking a health class and the unit is mental disorders. We just spent a couple days on eating disorders and were working on a packet. One of the questions is anorexia more alike or different than bulimia? Explain. I started writing about how they are more similar. One student asks the teacher about the question, which leads to the teacher explaining Joe to answer the question. I was in the middle of answering the question myself when I heard the teacher say that the answer is that they are more different. Not being able to help myself, I started to argue with the teacher. First on the basis that the two are more different, but then I argued that there can't be a wrong answer if you are able to thoroughly explain your answer due to the wording of the question. The teacher refused to change her mind. Now note that this wasn't an obnoxious argument, this was more of a civil discussion. The entire class, about 30 kids, all agreed with me, but the teacher continued to refuse to even consider that we could be right. So I got mad and devised a plan. I wrote a 6-page research paper about how anorexia and bulimia are similar, properly citing sources and everything MLA style. It had a bibliography page and everything. I then submitted the paper as my answer for the question, which only required about a sentence to answer it. The teacher still refused to give me credit for my answer. I went to administration. I told them the story and gave them my paper and everything. I was expecting them to tell me to stop wasting their time, but the principal actually decided to hear me out. After reading my paper and reviewing the entire question, he determined that I deserved full credit for the question. So then the teacher gave me credit and an apology for his behavior. I also apologized for making a whole dang debacle out of everything, but I wanted him to know that just because we are students we aren't immediately wrong. So for about 6 hours of work I got the full 2 points for the question. Overkill? Yes. Worth it? I think so. Good on you. You stuck to your guns and proved yourself right, while learning about how to present an argument effectively to people in power. I'd argue that's probably more valuable than the material you learned about in the unit. Once again, not a teacher, but in 4th grade we had a book report type assignment and we had to make a visual aid. Most people made pictures or models made from sticks and craft supplies, but my best friend, at the time, made a full-on working fountain. I'm pretty sure his dad was in the mafia and my friend did absolutely none of the project though. Okay. If you are new to the channel, you can subscribe. I publish new videos every day. Until then, check another video. Bye for now.